Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today we're going to be doing a first look at the game Rule the Waves 3. This is from Naval Warfare Simulations and is published by Matrix Games. As you might guess by the title, this is the third game in a series. And the Rule the Waves series basically lets you play the role of a Grand Admiral of one of the world's bigger navies. There's quite a selection of nations and so on that we'll get to in a little bit. But the gist of the game is that you can start in the year 1890 and play all the way through the year 1970. That is 80 years of naval history, and it covers everything from the pre-dreadnought era through the heyday of the battleship, through the advent of aircraft carriers, and obviously guided missiles. So there's a whole lot of game in here, and we're going to take a first look and see kind of what the game has to offer, and then probably down the road I'll do some playthroughs and maybe a review, etc., etc. So let's get right down to business. Okay, so here we are at the main screen where we can choose to continue a game, start a new game, etc., etc. Let's click on the About button here so you can see that you have a link to the Naval Warfare Simulations forum as well as the Matrix Games forum. Let's go with New Game. And here are the four starting years that you can choose from. So you have 1890, pre-dreadnought, 1900, which is kind of still pre-dreadnought, but close to the advent of the dreadnought. 1920, which would be post the immediate aftermath of the First World War, and then 1935, as we were heading full scale into the Second World War. So you have your choices of any of those four starting points, and actually in the 1900 area, if we click on it. So here you can see that you have these are the nations that are available, right? So it's Europe, but then you also have countries that aren't in Europe that are down here, right? So we have obviously Great Britain, France, Spain, Italy, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Russia. So basically the main European belligerents of the First World War. Then we also have Japan, the United States, and China. So it's an interesting mix here of, possible starting points. And if you click on one, so if we click on Germany, you'll get information about the country you've selected. So Germany has a large navy, good economy, technology base, right? It tells you all this information about it. The type of government they have, what their build area is, and the build area is basically where your ships are going to spawn, for lack of a better word, where you're building your ships, where they get launched. Your naval budget, which determines, what you can do. It's basically currency, and you can use that to you will be using it to not only maintain your fleet, but you will also use it to build new vessels for your fleet. Cautious, a technology leader, a bombastic head of state. These are all kind of national characteristics that you can have. The various nations obviously have them, and they impact the game in a variety of ways. Dock size is basically the limit in the tonnage that you can build. So with a 14,000 dock size, we can build ships up to 14,000 tons. And then you have your research advantages or disadvantages and bonus tax, and so on and so forth. The Germans, obviously, they have this here, specialized submarine designs. As you might expect, the Germans were always very good at building submarines, as we know from our history of both the First and Second World Wars. Tells you which naval guns they possess at start. You can research new sizes, so you can go up, even bigger, of course. The opponent nation, so these will be the other navies that will be existing in the game world as you play. Now, the game is not tied directly to history. So if we start here in 1900, you are not necessarily going to end up having World War I begin in 1914. The relationships you have with the other nations will vary. I've played as the U.S. several times, and I've had alliances with Germany, and I've had alliances with Japan and Austria and Italy, and Britain. I mean, pretty much everybody. France, Japan. I think I've had an alliance at one time with everybody except Spain. And I started in 1890, and I've the wars I've fought in my first handful of games playing this have typically been with Spain. So from that extent, there is some historical, historicity, I guess, behind things, but it's not directly tied to, to the point where, hey, it's 1914, we need to start the First World War. It doesn't work that way. So just be aware of that. You will have allies. You can have allies who will join you in a war. Obviously, you can end up having a big war like World War I, World War II, etc. Depending on when you start, you might have different types of governments. Like obviously, if you started in 1935 and you play as Germany or Italy or Japan, you're going to have a fascist government. If you play as the British, you'll always have a constitutional monarchy. So if we click on Great Britain, for example, you can see it's a liberal democracy with a prime minister. So basically a constitutional monarchy, like I said. You can see that they have it says right here, large navy and a good economy, many colonies, worldwide obligations, and many potential adversaries. Britain's not hard to play, but could be overwhelming if it's your first game. For obvious reasons, there's a lot to manage if you play as the British, because they have a massive navy, and as it says, a lot of obligations and colonies all over the world, and etc. And we'll get into the map and all that stuff here in a minute or two. So if we just wanted to pick a nation to play, we can go simple and go with the United States. The United States is a good starting point because they don't, unlike the Europeans, they don't have neighbors right there with them that are potential rivals. The U.S. is somewhat isolated by nature of being in North America and not Europe. They also have a large-ish navy as of 1900 and a rapidly growing economy, as it says, and they're also good with tech, just like the Germans are good with tech as well. So you can see they get research advantage for radar and electronics and some bonus tech for the turrets. So X and B, these are positions. The letters, and once you design a ship, and we'll look at the ship designer, there are positions where you can put turrets and things like that. So X turret is on the back of the ship, and a B turret is at the front of the ship. That I know that from playing around with it. Obviously, aircraft carrier conversion is also a bonus tech for the Americans. As you can see, their budget is fairly large. They also have the same dock size as the Germans do here, to have a contemporary example, and they've got the full range of guns between 2-inch and 12-inch. So once you pick, you hit OK, then you get to enter your name. So let's go with, in honor of my channel, we'll go with Von Hext. I'm going to start with a large fleet since it says I have a large fleet. I'm going to go with a large fleet. Scale of the game, basically, right? There's a lot of tooltips in here, which is nice. So if you hover over something, it'll tell you something about it. The tooltips are very, very well done, and they are very prevalent throughout the game. So you can adjust all of this stuff. Tech variation, I usually leave it at slight because you can make it fully historical, or you can have it mix it up a little bit so that you don't expect to have certain things happen at specific times. It gives it a little bit of a variation. Harsher peace deals, you can give the AI an advantage. I have not reached this point yet, but once you get really good at the game, you probably can give the AI a slight advantage to make it more challenging. It also could help if you're playing as the British or something, and you have, the giant Royal Navy basically ruling the seas already. It might be nice to give the AI an advantage to get a challenge. You can slow down the development of aircraft, make aircraft carriers less powerful at the start. So another thing you can do, obviously airbase size. You also have this manual build of legacy fleet. I think this is only applicable for 1900, but basically you can build your starting fleet manually, and this is the only scenario in which you are allowed to do so. So if we say we're going to go in game slot number 2, you have to pick a slot for where you're going to save. It does give you 9 of them. Then you can hit OK, and now we get into the game. Okay, so here's the game interface. So the first thing that we need to address here, because I know some people are a little bit more picky about what interfaces look like, and they're into graphics and stuff. And yes, this does look like this was, some kind of like business related software from, the mid to late 90s or so. Very, very, Windows 95 or something kind of style. This is not a game that is built around having state-of-the-art graphics, obviously. It's very straightforward. It's a lot of informational screens. It's very functional, but it's not going to blow your socks off by any stretch of the imagination in a graphical sense. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Caveat right up front, if you are into, animation and seeing your ships fire broadsides and, smoke and flame and splash and all that stuff, you're not getting that in this game. This is a very, very simulation-y type of thing, which doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm an old goat. I've been around a while. I was playing games in the 80s and so on, wherein graphics were really terrible. So this doesn't really bother me. I'm more interested in the crunchiness of the simulation itself, and this game hits those targets pretty nicely. So, but I know it's not a one-size-fits-all world. You might not feel the same way I do about this. So let's just get that out of the way up front. All right, so this is the list of your fleet. Now, I picked a large fleet. You can see this is indeed a large fleet. We have a slew of destroyers here. We have some corvettes. We have a bunch of light cruisers, 2 armored cruisers or heavy cruisers, depending on how you want to phrase it. And then we have 2, 4, 6 battleships. Now, these are not necessarily historical. The ship names tend to be somewhat historical, like we're the U.S. Navy, so our battleships are named after states. Our cruisers are named after cities. Our destroyers are typically named after someone, a personage of historical significance, etc., etc. So, just kind of going through here, you've got your ship name. Well, first you got your type, so that this is a B, and a B is an old battleship before you get to the Dreadnought era when you start to get BB, which is obviously, what we are probably more familiar with because that's what the more recent vintage of battleships were always BB. So we have a B. Then you have the name of the ship, so USS Delaware, USS Michigan, Oklahoma, etc., etc. The class of the ship, which is important, and we'll talk about that in a second. Its displacement in tons, its speed. This is, what is this? Range, I believe? Oh, radar. Sorry. Radar. It's anti-submarine warfare capabilities, the year it was launched or completed. They will mark your ships obsolete as technology passes them by. You can mothball your ships to put them in reserve and hold them for emergency purposes, which really will shrink their maintenance cost, or you can actually scrap them as well. Location, we'll see it on the map here in a second. Status. So there are various statuses, as you can see here. Active fleet is AF, reserve fleet, mothballed, trade protection. So when you're at war, basically it's a convoy escort. Then R for raider, and is that all of them? I need to leave and come back. A workup. WU. When you first launch your ship and you're basically getting it, doing the shakedown and getting your crew ready and all that stuff. That's the workup stage. Crew quality, everybody's fair. You'll end up with a varying degree, and there's a lot of kind of things that go into determining your crew quality. The maintenance cost, so this is how much it costs per month to maintain, and then down here we have all our information on that. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then what the weapons that the ship carries. So this guy has the Delaware class battleship has 4 12-inch guns and 16 6-inch guns, while the Oklahoma class has 4 12-inch guns, 8 8-inch guns, and 2 torpedo tubes. Then the value of the ship for blockade purposes. So the game uses kind of a calculation of total strength. So if you wanted to blockade somebody, say you're the Royal Navy and you want to blockade Germany, you need to have enough, I think the number is 110%. You need to have 110% the blockade strength of the enemy fleet in that area to successfully blockade them, which is pretty straightforward. You can create divisions, so that's what this is. Division, the ship is assigned to you. You assign them to divisions by class, basically. So cruisers, they'll have a cruiser division or more than one. destroyer division, battleship division, etc., and our commanding officer. You have captains. The captains have abilities. They may have, extra things in there as well. You might have someone who's a rate of fire expert, or someone who is, a slacker, or things like that. There's a whole bunch of different ones that will have impacts on their performance. They also have quality. They can be anywhere from poor to elite, essentially. I'm probably not using the right terms, but a lot of them will be around average. So you'll see average, below average, and above average, more than you'll see anything else. And you also have the ability to have a naval academy once you research it, where you can kind of make your officers come out of there a little bit more likely to be, better than worse. They can also be promoted. So depending on the class they're commanding, like here we have these light cruisers, they're commanded by commanders, right? Which, if you're familiar with U.S. naval ranks, that is one rank below captain. And then we have captains, and then obviously you have the ability to actually become an admiral, and admirals can control, divisions and so on and so forth. So pretty straightforward. They did not include captains for destroyers in the manual. It mentions they did this because they didn't think that you would want to manage, all of these destroyers, because you can end up with a ton. As you can see here, we have a lot of destroyers and a lot of corvettes, and they have commanders, but they're abstracted. So, that is probably for the best, because it would get a little unwieldy. All right, so now we look at the map. So that's zoomed in. You can zoom out with the mouse wheel. You can right click and drag. Right, so since we're the U.S., let's kind of head this way so we can see all of our stuff. Right, so obviously here's the U.S. We have a West Coast fleet. It'll tell you who owns it, the base capacity. So that's how much basing it can have, basically. The batteries, that's coastal forts. Does it have oil? It's ports: Seattle, San Francisco, and San Diego. If you left click on it, you get a little bit more information. It's really kind of the same thing, but you can also build bases and fortifications in here as well. Right? So we have the East Coast, which is where most of our stuff is going to be based, and it'll show you because we have ships here. We have 6 battleships, 8 light cruisers, 38 destroyers, and 11 corvettes here, for a total naval strength of 124. The British have 2 armored cruisers and a light cruiser for a total of 16. These would be the guys hanging out up in Canada. Then we have the Caribbean as well. If you click on the Caribbean, you can see that you have information about what the possessions in that area are. So the U.S. has the Gulf Coast, of course. Panama's neutral. The British have Grand Panama, New Providence, Jamaica. The U.S. has Puerto Rico. The Virgin Islands are neutral. France has Antilles, Trinidad with the British, Venezuela, Haiti, the Dominican, Guantanamo Bay, which is Cuba, and then Cuba neutral. I think at this, I don't remember when we, as in the Americans, let the, stopped. Obviously, the Cuba changed hands in the Spanish-American War, and this is a little embarrassing, but I don't know when the Cubans were given their independence. But they were fighting for their independence anyway, so it may have been right after the war. Not really material to this particular discussion. The U.S. does have the Guantanamo Bay base, though. Bases are important for doing things like invading other areas. If you zoom in, so let's zoom into the Caribbean. That's the Pacific. So here's the Caribbean. So you can zoom in really far, right? So here's Puerto Rico, right? And here's Cuba, and there's Guantanamo Bay. Right, and so the Cuba has no flag because it's neutral, right? And you can see all of the ports. So Guantanamo Bay has a port, right? Now there's this thing here which will show you the invasion range, and I'll need to zoom out a little bit. So it looks like that would be this circle here, which does not include Puerto Rico. So we could not invade Puerto Rico from Guantanamo Bay. We do have a base here in Haiti. So from Haiti, we could invade Puerto Rico. This is just for an example. But if we were at war and needed to invade somewhere, you have to have This invasion range is key to knowing what you can attack. Then you can also put who has oil production and where that oil production is in terms of possessions, etc. Oil is obviously important for ship fuel. You do have different technologies as far as fueling your ships, what they're powered by. And at the beginning of the game, it's very rudimentary, and then obviously it gets better and better as time goes on. We also have the Northern Pacific. Here we have some Alaska, some Aleutians. You have Midway. You have Hawaii. You have Guam. You have the Philippines, etc., etc. So you get the general idea, right? And this was when the Bismarck Archipelago was still owned by the Germans. Down here we have the Carolines. Over here we have the Marshalls, etc., etc., right? So very, very straightforward. And you have the entire world, basically. And little flags that show you who owns what, who's in control where, which is all very important, right? So we have Alaska up here as well. And as I mentioned, you can zoom in. It'll show you if it has a fort there. You can look at we have San Francisco, we have San Diego, and then up the coast we have Seattle right there. So there you go. So that's the map. Okay, let's talk about ships, constructing of ships, rather. So here we have ships that are currently under construction. We're building a North Dakota class battleship called the USS Montana. It has 11 months left. It is being built locally because you can also buy ships from foreign countries. You run the risk of it becoming impounded if you actually go to war with them. But the benefit of doing that is you can build ships that are larger than what you can build yourself, depending on whether or not the nation you're buying it from has a larger port capacity than you do. Or dock size, rather. And you also can take advantage of their technology. If they are more technologically advanced than you are, maybe you don't have 14-inch guns yet. You can buy it from have a country that does have 14-inch guns, build you a battleship with those guns on it. So that's a way to kind of get around that. But as I mentioned, you do have the risk of, if your relations with that nation go bad, then you're going to end up possibly not getting that ship that you paid for. So you'll see the basic stats that are kind of the same as what we saw on the ships and service tab, as far as, displacement and speed and radar and anti-sub and all that stuff, right? How long it's going to take to build. It's a new ship or rebuild, because you can take a ship that maybe is a little outdated and you can't change the displacement, so you can't make it bigger. But you can change some things about it. There are things you cannot change, but there are some things you can. You can improve the guns, for example. That's one thing that you can do. Change the turrets, etc., etc. So you can build, you can change the superstructure, kind of, essentially, is what it really is. How much it costs per month for the building of the ship, and then its armament and all this stuff you don't have to worry about yet, right? So while we're on this screen, let's come down here and look at this. So you have your prestige. Your prestige is basically like the currency that is used to determine your influence. And if it hits 0, you lose the game, you get fired. Typically, when you're playing the game, you'll have events pop up each turn. Well, maybe not every turn, but from time to time. And you'll get to choose what you do. So you're in charge of the Navy. The president might say, hey, we want to do this. What do you think? You have to give them an answer. The answer you give them can impact your budget. It can impact your prestige. It can impact tensions with other nations. So that's what your prestige can be used, because you can do things that increase your prestige. These are typically things that are more hardline, war, hawk kind of things. If you elect to go with, a more softer stance, angling in favor of peace or whatever, then that's going to decrease your prestige typically. So these are all things that you have to kind of take into account. Your relationships with the other nations are all part of this as well. So again, just things to think about. Your morale 0 is basically average. It can go negative or positive, and it affects the crew quality in battle, as it says. Tonnage on foreign stations. Sometimes you'll have to have ships on foreign stations, a specific amount of tonnage for, basically the purposes of showing the flag. So that tracks that. Your dock size, your shipyard capacity. So this is how much you can build, basically. So here we have the total building capacity. Here we have the displacement of ships currently being built. And this is the remaining capacity for additional building. Unrest level, you can have unrest in your population. If you hit 10, then as it says, you run the risk of a revolution. We don't have any build requirements. These come from peace treaties. So like I'm assuming, like Treaty of Versailles, Germans are limited in what they can do. That would be in your build requirements. That would be treaty limits as well. Peace treaties, all kinds of stuff, right? Yearly budget. So this is what we get per year. Obviously that gets divided by 12 for your monthly budget. How much we're spending on maintenance. And estimated maintenance if everything's active. Your construction, this is what you're paying for what you're building at the moment. You have no naval aircraft yet. It is 1900, so that's a good reason why. Research, so how much do you spend each month on research? You can take your monthly budget and spend a certain percentage of that, up to 12%. Anything above 10% is diminishing returns, but typically I try to go to 10% if I can. You have extra training and intelligence that you can spend on. And then so you have your total expenses here. And here's our monthly balance and how much we have in the bank. So if you run at a surplus and keep your balance positive, your funds will grow. If you overspend, your funds will shrink. Pretty straightforward. Over here you have your action buttons to design a ship, build subs once they're researched. Build a fort or base. Research, you click on research. These are the areas of research. You can prioritize them low, medium, or high. And then these are the levels of research. If you start in the 1890s, these will all be zeros or negative in some cases. Then our guns. Here you can see there are some negative qualities. Everything from 7-inch up to 12 is -1, and we don't have any research yet on the big guns. So those are handled here. And then everything else, if you click on it, it'll show you what you've done and what you get from those, right? So like light forces and torpedo, this is where this is what gives you destroyers. So you initially get a 300-ton destroyer, then you can build up to 400, then it becomes 500, and so on as you go up the ladder. Very, very straightforward. The tech is very straightforward. There's not like a tree that you have to worry about or anything like that. It just kind of goes on its own, so to speak. You can't focus on something overly much except by using priority, and even then it's just a slight focus as opposed to being something like in Civ or some other games where you really focus on specific things. And here's where you would set your budget. So if we wanted 10%, you just change it like that, hit OK. Design a ship. So the ship designer, this is really neat. Okay, so first you pick your class, right? Your type. What do you want? Let's build a pre-dreadnought, right? Then you can actually type a name. So, you could type a state in here if you wanted to, or you could say suggest name. It says New Jersey. Okay. You can ask the computer to design one for you. You click this button and hit OK, and then it builds us a 13,600-ton pre-dreadnought battleship with, you have your freeboard, your speed, your range, engine priority. You have speed and reliability or normal. The propulsion is coal. Obviously, as we go up, you can get up to diesel and gas turbine, etc. Armor. Your belt, the coverage, you can have normal or narrow, extended belt, upper belt, deck extended, conning tower, turrets, turret top, secondary, all this stuff. What type of armor scheme? And this tells you your total armor over here. Now, all of this stuff adds weight. And so you're trying to keep your weight, and here's our total weight. We're trying to keep our weight under 13.6 because that's what this is set at. Now you can make it bigger up to the limit of your dock. which is 1,400. So we can add 400 tons to this. That would give us a little extra space if we wanted to maybe carry extra rounds. Each round of each group of ammo here is going to add, so if I go to 90, this goes red because we're now overweight. I can increase my weight by clicking this, and now it's good. So it's all a trade-off. If you want to go faster, you go to 20. That is a big weight change because you have to up the engine. So that's kind of how you have to do this. You can build all this stuff. There's also there's additional armament, right? Here's all our guns. This is what I was talking about. If we clicked add turret, so you have your positions that you can add a turret. You can have casemate, single, double, triple, quadruple. Obviously, you don't have the research for all of these at start. So single and double will be early, early stuff. Triple and quadruple would be later stuff. And this would determine the positions. Remember, I mentioned B and X being forward and aft, respectively. That's when you have two turrets on the front, 2 turrets on the back. Gun data, you can click this. It'll show you kind of the range for each type, the belt penetration, the deck penetration. You can clear your turrets, etc. You have different turret styles that you can change, which will change what they look like. If you watch this picture over here, as I change this, you'll see the turret change, etc. You have your secondary guns here, caliber and quantity, how many guns per turret. You can also have casemates, etc., just like you could with these guys. And you also have tertiary guns, and you also have anti-aircraft guns. As we get further along, that stuff becomes more and more important, of course. Right? So all pretty much straightforward, nothing overly complicated. There's also graphics where you can kind of use this to build out your ship, put different things in here. Obviously this is a graphic overhead shot of what the ship looks like. You can change the superstructure and everything. You can add things like anchors and all kinds of stuff. So sponsons, there's all kinds of things you can add here. Really cool. And a little, like I said, it's a little bit complicated to get everything to work out. And you kind of have to, you can't just build the monster ship. You have to have the, you have to have the dock yard space to build it displacement wise. You can't have a cruiser or a destroyer with big guns, because that isn't a destroyer anymore, essentially. And then you mess up the AI, is what the rule book says. So it locks you in. If you're building a cruiser and you upgun it too much or make it too big, it's going to turn into a battleship. So that's kind of how things work. And you have to kind of keep that in mind. So once you build this, you can do save and finish. It'll check it for you. And if it's okay, then you can say it says ship designed as New Jersey. Do you want to start developing it? That would cost $36.10 and take 3 months. This $36.10 is total. So it's actually $1,203 for 3 months. And you can do that. And then you can also load old designs from in here. So these are the designs we started with. You just have the name of the class, and you can load that up and use that as the basis to tweak it for the next iteration. So if you like the look of something and you just want to make it bigger or maybe upgun it or something like that, you can load it, use that, and it actually is a little bit of a cost savings for you too. Your costs are tracked in this column. You can see the total cost for this is $50,000. That's an expensive ship. It costs $1,786 per month for 28 months. That's the other thing, because of the way technology advances, you might start building a battleship and it'll be obsolete before it even gets launched. Something to consider. Other things, you have submarines, as I mentioned, coastal forts. These are your forts, what battery they have, where they're located, etc., etc. Any ships that are sunk in battle or scrapped will appear in this list. Area overview. This is a good place to look to see what you've got and where it is. Obviously, for the U.S. Navy, the North American East Coast is our biggest. We have the biggest base capacity here. We have 115 ship base. That's our tonnage here, and so on and so on. Here's our foreign station requirements for Southeast Asia. We have to have 6,000 tons For the Central Pacific, also 6. For the Northern Pacific, 4. So you will have to meet these requirements to to avoid a penalty. Base overviews of all of our bases all the way around the world, and then our officer list, what their names are, what they're commanding, and then these guys down here would be unassigned officers. Basically, they're on shore duty and they can be given a job. As you play the game, they will develop traits and skill levels. The fog of war will be removed essentially, and you'll know, right, what their ability and any special abilities are. Doctrine. You can have training priorities that you can apply. You can also set ammunition usage for various targets. Your ship ammo loadout. Here's where you would run your Naval Academy if you wanted to. If you click on it, it tells you how much it costs per month, etc. What else do we have? You have messages. This comes up every month. It'll tell you what's going on. Mobilization. This activates all your mothballed and reserve ships. You can send everybody to reserves. You can create divisions, as I mentioned before. You can do a fleet exercise where you'll define like a kind of an aggressor force or a red force and a blue force, etc. History will show you your history as for your prestige, your tonnage, your economy, your ships lost, etc. all the way through. And then preferences, pretty basic stuff here. Sound and video, of course, and then gameplay stuff. There's a tactical battle. I won't show that for time reasons, but when you're at war with somebody, you go into battle, and you can actually control the ships. The AI will control some of them depending on command range and so on and so forth. So you'll have cruisers chasing after each other and all kinds of stuff, and they take damage, and there are points scored, and you can sink them. You can get your own ship sunk or sink other nations' ships. All that plays into your war. Whatever your score is for your war, so that will impact what peace terms there are. You can, as I mentioned earlier, invade enemy areas, and you might have a naval battle leading into that because you're having an amphibious invasion essentially. So there's a whole lot in here that I have not shown, but I did want to kind of go through the basics of the game before doing a playthrough. So I'll do a playthrough video probably in a couple days that will show you how the game actually plays. We'll see some battles, we'll see some wars. We'll progress through months, we'll design new ships, we'll build them. We'll scrap. We'll rebuild something. We'll do as much of the the meat and potatoes of the game as possible, so you'll have a full picture. But for now, I wanted to keep this reasonably short, and I feel like I've rambled on a lot longer than I wanted to. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I'll just let you know that there will be more. So if you are interested in this game, check back because there will be more. But that's going to do it for now. My name's Joe. This is Hexed Encountered. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, my usual rigmarole at the end. If you are a subscriber, thank you very much. I appreciate the support. That'll do it for this particular installment of Hexed Encountered, and until next time, happy gaming.